In this episode of the AWS Developers podcast, we're talking about package and dependencies management with CodeArtifact. It's right now. Stay tuned. Good morning, good afternoon. It's Friday, and Friday is the day of the new episode of the AWS Developers podcast. All things developers, all things AWS in your podcast application. So please register, send us a thumbs up, a small star, leave us a comment. That's how we know how to improve and make these episodes even more valuable for you in the future. Today, we don't have one host. I don't have one host. I have two hosts for the price of one. I have Carl Lewis and Derek Tam. You're both development manager within the CodeArtifact team. Maybe the first, most basic question: what is AWS CodeArtifact?
Hey, Sebastian. Yeah, thanks for having us on your podcast. Real quick, CodeArtifact is a fully managed artifact repository service from AWS that lets developers store software packages. We launched it in 2020, and we supported Maven, NPM, Python, NuGet packages. And in recent years, we've added support for NuGet, Ruby, Cargo, and Swift, and generic packages, which allows customers to store zip files and generic archives. Using CodeArtifact, customers can use their native client package managers to connect to CodeArtifact and store and publish and share these packages with their other developers. But also we have this functionality which lets developers pull down public packages from public repositories into their private CodeArtifact repositories.
Okay, we are going to pause down and slice that into small parts, digestible parts. I guess package and dependencies is someone our listener knows about. When you're developing an application, you typically import third-party or internal packages. If you're developing with JavaScript, it's npm something. With Python, it's pip something. So why should customer use an internal repository for their package instead of fetching the package from the public source that you mentioned, Maven, NuGet, and all the others?
Yeah, I guess one good reason is availability, right? Like you don't have control over what happens to these public repositories, what's published to it, and if you have your own private repository, you get to control that, right?
So the idea is to download the package from the public source and have like a local cache internal to your enterprise and to your VPC. I guess it's mostly for you say availability. It's mostly for the case of CI/CD, because for the individual developers, if a package is not okay, it can be a challenge for individual developers as well. If I type npm something and the server is not right there. Availability is definitively one of the challenge. Is there something also about security? We saw so many stories about supply chain attack in the recent years. Is it also a reason why developers or the people in charge of the development infrastructure are choosing CodeArtifact?
We definitely have features in the product that can help you control which packages you're using. For example, if you want to create block lists to prevent downloading of certain packages and preventing you developers from using those in your applications, that's a functionality that we have in CodeArtifact. You can either select which packages to block or which groups of packages to block, or go the other way and just actually have an allow list where you explicitly enable certain packages for use and the rest are blocked. So that's one way you can exercise more control. It's just really knowing what you're using. Most applications use a lot of open source dependencies. It's pretty common to have hundreds or maybe even thousands of different dependencies in your dependency closure for your application. And so when you download something from a CodeArtifact, that's recorded in CloudTrail. So that creates a permanent record of all the things that are being consumed, which gives you a lot more visibility into what developers in your organization are using.
I guess there is some IAM policies associated with the developer account that is downloading the package from CodeArtifact. So the granularity is really this group of developer has the authorization to use these and these packages. Is it how it works?
Yeah, you can use the standard IAM privileges, right? So either IAM users or IAM roles to access CodeArtifact. So you can set up to typically that's done at the repository level. So you could say, okay, this developer or group of developers has access to a certain set of repositories which they're going to use for their applications. For when you're writing packages, like publishing packages into your repository, that can be done at the package level. So that, for example, one pipeline, or CI/CD pipeline that's publishing that package, could have exclusive access to publish only that package.
So security is one reason to use CodeArtifact. Availability is another one. What else?
Cost, I would say. A lot of our customers have told us that they're saving money. I can't say how much, but they're saving a lot of money by moving to CodeArtifact.
Explain how, because if you don't use CodeArtifact, you go directly fetch your package from the remote public repositories.
Yeah.
So in what way it's a cost saving?
Yeah, a lot of our customers are using private custom software to store their packages securely, be it for their company or for their small software shop. And they're not all just using these public repositories, right? They have their own packages that they need to store. They've got variations of these packages that they need to modify and store. So they need to have some sort of private storage, and this costs money, right? If they have some on-prem solution, they've got to buy the software license, they've got to maintain it, upgrade the license, apply patches, and it takes time and money, right? With CodeArtifact, it's a managed service, and it's very cheap to use if you look at the pricing model that we have for CodeArtifact. And just not having to maintain the software and the low cost of using it combined together, it saves customers money basically.
Yeah, it's a fully managed services. So in the spirit of many fully managed services, there is nothing to install. There is no EC2 instance to maintain. There is no storage to maintain. You guys are maintaining that for our customer. You said it's quite cost effective. I'm not going to go to the price because prices are changing all the times and they are well documented on the website. But what are the main metrics that we charge customer for using CodeArtifact? I guess one of them is the total size of the storage. Something per gigabit per month or something like that?
Yeah, we charge for storage, as you said. The number of requests that you make to CodeArtifact, the data transfer, which is transferring data. I think, is it out towards the internet or in from the internet? I can't quite remember, Carl.
Yeah, out to the internet. Egress.
So the cost going out of from AWS to internet. Sorry.
Correct.
Cost, security, availability. Another one.
Yeah, I think this is not a direct benefit maybe to customers, but one thing is being a good citizen on the internet with public repositories.
Explain me that.
There was a blog. There was a blog post just this week from Brian Fox, who is the CTO of Sonatype. They operate the Maven Central repository, which is the number one place on the internet where Java developers and other people working in the JVM ecosystem get packages. And what he said is there's a lot of traffic to Maven Central, and that's been growing really quickly over the last few years to the point where it's difficult for them to manage the load that on Maven Central. And it's kind of a plea from him to say, hey, the best practice is to use a repository management product which acts as a caching proxy in front of these public repos, and to actually prevent so much traffic from going to those central servers.
Yeah, because if you listen to us and you have a CI/CD chain that does just a Maven install, for example, running inside your CI/CD, it means at every single commit in your code base, your build machine fetch package, a full copy of the package from the Maven repo, from the public repo. I saw a message on X this week talking about that blog post. I didn't read the blog post, but you can find the notes in the notes of the podcast show. So you just scroll down a bit, you will find the link to that blog post. He said that 1% of the IP addresses that are clients of Maven repo are consuming 83% of the total bandwidth. It's more than the 20-80 rule. It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh, he said 83% of the total bandwidth is being consumed by 1% of the IP addresses. And so because many of those, much of the traffic originates from public clouds, it's very difficult for Maven Central to know who's actually running these builds, which are pulling down all these dependencies. It makes it difficult to contact people, right? Yeah, it could be in AWS or in Azure or wherever, right?
And so CodeArtifact acts as a cache, as you mentioned, because my CI/CD is going to pull the package from CodeArtifact within my VPC, and CodeArtifact will only refresh to the upstream repository when there is a new version of the package available. So yeah, I can have tens of thousands of builds per day or per week or month. It will not impact the traffic on the Maven repo.
Exactly.
Your team has been quite active the last few weeks, months, adding new functionalities to CodeArtifact. I worked with you to write a few blog posts about adding support for Swift. I think it was end of last year. Ruby, and more recently Cargo for Rust developer. What are the other things that changed recently?
Well, we did launch support for package group configuration back in April, which is a security-based feature. It's not a package format, which allows developers to block or allow packages from being added to their repositories. I think the name of the game, though, for CodeArtifact is, more package format support. That's what we've been hearing for customers, and that's been our focus in the last few weeks, and it's going to continue to be our focus for the next little while here.
Yeah, let's recap, because I think you mentioned them all at the beginning, but it was so fast I couldn't list them all. So Python, so pip, JavaScript, TypeScript with NPM, C#, that's NuGet.
Yep.
What else? I mentioned Swift, Cargo, and Rust last week or just a few weeks ago. Ruby and Gem. Most of the major programming languages are there. Is there anything else on your list that customers are asking for?
We're definitely that's our goal for the next foreseeable future here, at least for the next 6 to 12 months, is to continue to add more package formats. We are aware of other feature requests from customers. We are working on making the service a little bit more friendly to use. But I think those are our two major focuses right now: adding more package support and addressing usability requests from customers.
Talking about usability, how to get started. I have an AWS account. I go to the AWS console, CodeArtifact, and then how can I get started?
Yeah, it's dead simple. You don't even need to talk to it. Literally, you go, assuming that you have an AWS account, you navigate to the CodeArtifact console. You create a domain, which kind of encapsulates your repositories, right? You create the domain first, and then you can create your repositories. And then from there's some connection instructions for you to say, hey, this is how I connect my NuGet client to CodeArtifact. And you can probably get running within, I would say, 10, 15 minutes, assuming that you already have an AWS account. And you already have like a build setup, obviously. You're already using NuGet or NPM or something.
So what is that concept of domains? Why would customer have multiple domains? Is it one domain per application or per department, per organization?
Yeah.
How customers are using domains? Yeah,
it's mainly for organizations. It's like, just think of it as like a container, basically, for your repositories, right? You've got 100 repositories here, you've got 50 here, and you've got like 2 separate, completely different organizations within your company, for example. For example, you could have, I don't know if you'd ask this podcast, but you could have one for Amazon, one for AWS, as an example.
So the security settings, the access management is managed at the domain level. So that's one of the reasons to split in between multiple domains.
Yeah, you can apply IAM policies to both repositories and domains. As I said, it's more of a boundary layer is how I see it between the repositories. I don't know, Carl, if you have a different take on this.
No, I think, there's a lot of use cases where you want to have separate repositories in an organization. Like some people like to split out separate package types into different repos, although that's not necessary with CodeArtifact, but it can be more convenient sometimes. Often you might have different teams and, they have different sets of private packages that they want to have for that project or team. And so, we don't want to necessarily mingle all those in one repository. We want to separate them out for access control and other reasons. So that's great. So you can have multiple repositories. That's cool. But then you also want to have some level of common control over those. And you also want to share some packages between those separate repositories as well. Like, for example, all your third-party packages, which you're pulling down from Maven Central or whatever. So the domain kind of gives you the best of both worlds in sense, like, you can have things which is separate repos for different applications, but you can also have a common pool of packages which is shared in an efficient way between all of them.
So the next level, once you created the domain, is to create a repo. Again, what is the best practice to create a repo? Is it per programming language or per application?
I think we see customers doing a lot of different things. The only guidance I usually give is that don't have too many. Just create a small number, and unless you have really good reasons why you need more, that usually makes things simpler.
So there is no limit on the number of packages inside a repo. Or, I mean, yes, I guess there is some huge technical limit, but
there is no hard limit on the number of packages that you have in a single repository now.
And so next step is to also configure the upstream repo. So we tell the repo where it's going to fetch the package. Can we have multiple upstream repo for one CodeArtifact repository, like to mix Python and JavaScript packages?
Yeah, you can have multiple upstream repositories, like an upside down triangle, if you will, right? You've got your main repository at the bottom, and then you've got like, maybe 3 upstream repositories connected to different public repositories themselves.
I guess it depends at the end if customers are using one repo for one programming language, or if they are mixing, like your front end and back end might be in Python for the back end and in JavaScript for the front end. Then it makes sense maybe to have multiple upstream repository. Something that I saw as well when I was writing the blog post about CodeArtifact is that sometimes the recommendation is for customer to create 2 repositories, one which is connected to the upstream public, and the second one, which is the one the developers are going to fetch the package from, which consume the package from the first one. So why this 2 level of architecture?
Yeah, it helps separate your 3P packages from your first party packages. Sorry, when I say 3P, I mean third party. So when you request a package, let's say you want most popular package from NuGet.org, you request it to your main repository. It doesn't have it, right? So it's going to go upstream to your connector repository and say, hey, get me this package from NuGet.org. And it's going to store a copy of that in that upstream repository. It'll also retain a copy of it in your downstream main repository. But now there's a separation, right? You've got your 3P packages in that upstream repository. And then you mainly have your first party packages in your directly connected repository.
Yeah, it allows developer to publish the private package to the what I call the internal repository, the one where developers are, or the CI/CD pipelines are going to fetch the package without exposing your private package to the external upstream, the public upstream directory. It's difficult to explain without a small chart or diagram. We are not the only podcast here, but I hope you got the idea. You can see such architecture diagram in one of the last blog posts we published about CodeArtifact. I will share the link in the notes of this episode as well. When I ask the question how to get started, you say, okay, we first create the domain, then we create the repo, and then the console will give us connection information to connect to that repository. So it means I can use my regular pip npm Swift cargo command line tool. I just need to configure them to tell them, hey, the package are there and not in the public repo.
Yep, that's right. I mean, you can use your existing tooling to connect to CodeArtifact, basically.
And to define the URL or the URI of the CodeArtifact. So we provide guidance in the documentation to how to configure your tools.
Yeah, each one is a special, unique package manager, and they all have their own different configurations, how to connect to upstream, what credentials to provide, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we have a few different ways to make that a bit easier. One of them is in the AWS CLI. There are commands which we've implemented which know how to configure certain package managers. Say, for example, the npm client. You can use the AWS CodeArtifact login command. And assuming you've already configured your AWS credentials, you can run that command saying, hey, I want to use this repo, and then it'll basically call npm to write those values, the URL of the repository and your authentication token into the npm RC file. And so then, okay, great, now you're set up and you can start pulling or publishing packages. So that's one way that we provide to make it a bit easier.
And I guess it depends of the package manager that I'm using on my laptop, but is it possible to configure these to fetch some package from CodeArtifact and some other from another public external repository? Does it make sense? First, maybe it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you can certainly do that. What we advise usually is to, grab all your packages from a single endpoint, which is CodeArtifact, right? So then you're getting the advantage of having that cache there where you're insulated from anything that's happening with the public repo. But you can also, many package managers support pulling from multiple endpoints in a single invocation, so you can do that too.
And this configuration, that's something that every developer in the organization has to do on their laptop And then on the build pipeline, the continuous integration machines as well.
Yeah, that's right.
CodeArtifact is a regional service. How does it work if we have multiple development team or multiple CI team working across different AWS regions?
Yeah, we currently don't have any cross-region capability in CodeArtifact to share packages across regions.
I mean, I think a lot of customers do want to have some kind of solution for DR, disaster recovery, where they have all the application dependencies in another region in case one region is either CodeArtifact has a problem or AWS as a whole has a problem. And so there are quite a few customers who have built a cross-region replication solution outside of the product. CodeArtifact supports CloudWatch events, or Event Bridge events, maybe they're called now, so that when a package enters a repository by any means, an event is sent. And so there's quite a few customers who leverage those events to run a Lambda or something similar, which can then copy that package over to another region and make it available in case disaster strikes.
So the chain is a developer requests a package from one repository in one region, the CodeArtifact emit an event on the event bridge, maybe a Lambda in another region, fetch that event from event bridge, and the Lambda issue the same NPM or pip or whatever cargo command locally in another region, so that the two repos are kept in sync. Talking about in sync, it's a cache, and one of the hard things in computing is invalidate cache and refresh cache. So what's the strategy? Are you checking for a new version of the upstream package at every access? What's the strategy to refresh that cache?
Yeah, we have actually a few strategies that CodeArtifact uses to keep its caches up to date and make sure that the new packages that are appearing on public repositories are quickly available for people to use. The first one is we have a TTL, like a time to live value, so that when customers are requesting packages, if that's expired, then we'll go and we'll refresh the package listing for that particular package, say from npmjs.com. So, and there's a new version, we'll put that into our metadata cache, and then that makes it available to CodeArtifact. There's also a few mechanisms which public repositories provide, and this is kind of getting into the weeds, but they provide replication feeds or APIs that vend lists of the recently updated packages. And so we integrate with some of those so that we can get much lower latency updates from those repos and have those keep our cache much fresher.
So for those repositories that provide this type of API, it means you're going to proactively refresh before the developer customer requests the package locally on its CodeArtifact?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not a regular cache, because with package, you need to keep all the different versions. You might have another developer asking for an older version of the package. So each package has multiple entries, actually, and you keep a copy of each version since the first usage of CodeArtifact.
Yeah, we have essentially caches which know what are all the versions of all the packages on all the public repositories that we support. So, there's millions of packages in npmjs.com, for example, same in Maven Central, and CodeArtifact maintains caches which list every single version that's on those repos. So that when,
I didn't understand your answer there. What you're saying is that there is an internal CodeArtifact cache in between the customer CodeArtifact and the public repositories?
Correct. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Wow, okay, I didn't realize that. I thought that each repo individually are connecting to their upstream. No, you're maintaining a giant cache at AWS level.
Correct. For each region, we maintain these caches so that, that's how we make sure that, we're minimizing the amount of traffic that's going to the public repositories. And also trying to give people the freshest, give people the updates, those new versions that are appearing there as soon as possible.
So I guess from your point of view, you saw thousands of customers deploying CodeArtifact and using CodeArtifact at different scales, some probably very small one like me as an individual developer, some very large enterprise. What are the best practice in terms of using CodeArtifact or deploying or creating an architecture with different upstream and downstream repositories?
I think Carl mentioned one already, which is minimizing the number of repositories, but we've also seen some customers try to create many domains, and I think there is maybe a misconception here of creating too many domains. But ideally, most companies will only have one domain in their CodeArtifact service.
Oh yeah, I think I don't know, some of the top ones for me are, use the package groups feature that we released earlier this year to protect yourself against, protect your private packages from being intermingled with public packages, right? And you can use that to ensure that all your private packages have names which are distinct from public packages, right? So, maybe your public packages all have use a certain Maven group ID, which isn't found in the public Maven package ecosystem. That CodeArtifact now makes it much easier to enforce those rules and prevent any naming conflicts from happening. That's one I would definitely call out. The other one is like around using the token and trying to make that easy for developers, because it does have to be refreshed every 12 hours. I think using the CLI tools that we provide or some package manager plugins can make it a lot easier to keep that token up to date, so that you can always have builds and you're not like constantly doing something manually to keep it fresh.
Let me interrupt you there. What token are we talking about? So when a developer types npm something, sorry, I'm always taking the example of JavaScript. I should use something else, cargo or what. There is some kind of authentication that has to be done on CodeArtifact using my IAM user or temporary key, access key, secret key. And the result of that authentication is I receive a token. And then the package manager that I use, cargo npm, has to give that token when they talk with CodeArtifact. And you're saying that token expire after 12 hours, so it's the responsibility of the developer to refresh that token?
Exactly, right, yeah. For security reasons, we don't allow long-lived tokens with CodeArtifact, and we also don't allow unauthenticated access. So you must have a token that you've gotten within 12 hours. And so you like as you described, you use your AWS credentials to fetch the token and then configure the package manager to use it on each request.
So what's the best practice for build pipelines, continuous integration there?
Actually,
is to get a new token at every run, or to cache it in a secret manager?
No, you can just, it's really easy. You drop a few lines, of CLI invocation, AWS CLI commands into your build script, and then to get the token when you start the build. And since there's not that many builds run longer than 12 hours, it's pretty easy to stay. There are some, certainly. I'm sure if you're building Chrome or something, but you just get what you want on each build, and it'll be authenticated for the whole duration of the build.
And if they do run over 12 hours, I hope they get all the package at the beginning, and then the rest is the compilation, the build, and the test itself. Sorry, going back to your best practices, so a bit of token management, domains.
Sorry, the other one is, I think, IAM policies on the repositories and domains. Make sure it's set up correctly. You don't want to be in a situation where you've exposed, your repository to.
Let's define correctly.
Anyone.
So in the AWS philosophy, it's the minimum access required. So create a group or role that has just the permission to access specific repository and specific package. Can we scope down to the package level, or like a group of package with an asterisk or something in the IAM policies?
Yeah, we can scope down to the package level. What I'm saying mainly here is, I think maybe that's a little bit too restrictive personally, but at the very least, like restrict down to the right number of people with like the right read and write permissions, right? You don't want to give the intern full write access to your repository, maybe. So I don't know if you want to do that. So
yeah, reading is very common, and I guess most developer in the team needs to have read access. Write access means publishing a new version of an internal package.
Or deleting, right?
Or deleting.
Yeah, like for example, if you had that, that one main linchpin, a repository at the top of your tree, right? And you give, the new hire, or like someone who's, not really aware of what they're doing, write access, they could go in there and delete something by accident, right? And then every downstream repository is going to be affected, or whoever's trying to access that repository is going to not find that package.
Anything else in the list of best practices?
I would say is use caching for your builds. I mean, CodeArtifact is itself a cache, but many build systems, for example, CodeBuild, offer another layer of caching actually on the build fleet. And so, when you start doing repeated builds of the same application, you can use that cache to avoid re-downloading dependencies. And if you're doing occasional builds, that doesn't make much difference. But if you have a large build fleet doing many, thousands of builds, then that can the costs can add up. And so it's an easy way to keep your CodeArtifact costs down just by caching that information on the build fleet.
I read somewhere tell me if I'm wrong, that the data transfer costs inside the regions are for free. So if your build fleet is inside the same region, you don't pay the bandwidth to access CodeArtifact, even if it is in another AZ. That's correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But there's not... CodeArtifact has 3 pricing dimensions. One is the data egress cost, which you're just talking about. But the other one, another one is request charges. So per each time you download a package or make another kind of request to CodeArtifact, there's a charge. And so, if you have a large, say, npm, a JavaScript application with thousands of dependencies, and for some reason you need to build that hundreds or thousands of times per day, then that can happen.
You have to make an analogy, it's like S3, where you pay for the outgoing bandwidth of S3, but you also pay for each API call, each get is built. And yes, so you can leverage the GitHub, GitLab, or Jenkins built-in mechanism for caching, so that the machine is not totally wiped out in between build. Wow. That's a nice tour of CodeArtifact. We can get started super easily with the command line, with the console. I guess, because there is a command line, that there is also an API. So some customer can create CDK scripts or Terraform scripts to create their infrastructure. Is it something you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I think that's really common. You can create a domain with a few repositories in it, with about a dozen lines of CloudFormation or CDK or Terraform. So I think, that's a really great way to get started as well, and something that customers do a lot to ensure that they don't have uncontrolled changes happening to their infrastructure.
And also control the access control, the configuration itself of the repository through code, to ensure that all the deployments of CodeArtifacts are the same across multiple regions or multiple AWS accounts for large customer. Okay, thank you. We discuss about CodeArtifact, the benefits for developer, the different ways to configure it, best practice in terms of architecture. Before wrapping up this conversation, anything else you want to add?
No, I think the blog posts that you wrote were really good, exploratory. How do you use this particular format? So I think for the audience, check out those blog posts. They're very well written.
Thank you. But one of the good things about this blog post is that they show how to use different package manager. I have an example with Swift, with Ruby, with Rust. That was the last one, and going into the small differences or details about how each local package manager behaves.
Yeah, I think those are good. And I think obviously the last one is give CodeArtifact a try. It's really easy to set up and just get going. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how easy it is to use.
That's CodeArtifact, an entirely managed service to run, to store, and to get access to your package within the security boundary of your AWS account and VPC. Carl, Derek, thank you for explaining CodeArtifact to the listener of this podcast. Next episode is next Friday. We are going to talk about GraphQL API with AppSync, and more specifically, asynchronous GraphQL API. It will be another Derek next week that will explain you that. And until then, go build.